So if I'm understanding correctly, when
Yeah,
someone experiences overwhelm or trauma early in life
yeah,
and their body and their consciousness doesn't know how to respond, part of them will disassociate and attempt to leave the experience psychologically in some way, and that has a lasting impact on the person.
that's right.
So, what is the lasting impact? Say someone has a very traumatic birth or a traumatic early life experience, and they disassociate because of the trauma or overwhelm in that experience. What impact does that have on them in both in that experience and later on in life?
Okay. Well, a primary long-term effect is, again, related to a disconnection from the overwhelming feelings involved. When those traumatic feelings are repressed, it affects our general ability to experience and express feelings. So we're less sensitive to our own feelings because we're literally defending ourselves internally from the overwhelming feelings. You follow what I just said?
Yes. So there's a feeling from the trauma that is now being repressed, and a lot of energy is going to that repression, and then defending it from being seen by others and yourself. Is that accurate?
Okay. And I'm saying it has a general effect
Okay.
on our ability to be emotionally sensitive because we're repressing our feelings to defend against the early traumatic feelings. That has a general effect of being less sensitive to our feelings.
So
That's
it so
very important.
yeah. So it doesn't just affect that feeling, but all your feelings.
Right. It's a
Hmm.
general repression or less sensitivity to our feelings. So, okay, here's another key point. When we're less sensitive to our feelings, we're less sensitive to other people's feelings. That is very important. When we're less sensitive to other people's feelings, it affects how we respond or don't respond to them.
How exactly does that manifest? So if we're less sensitive to our feelings, we're less sensitive to others' feelings. Um, how would someone perceive or notice that there's that change in someone's emotional reactions later on in life, and how would you be aware of it in yourself or others? What's an example of that or evidence of that later in life?
Well, the lack of sensitivity on the part of others is they'll make decisions and behaviors that, for example, have negative impact on other people. So, and they'll make that decision because they're less sensitive to the feelings of other people. They have less empathy. So this affects our politics, for example. Uh, some some political decisions are made based on self-interest with a disregard for common interest. That's very serious. It's problematic, uh, not only in our country, but quite a bit in our country. So that's an example. When you're less sensitive to other people's feelings, you're not conscious of their likely the effect on them, but you're doing something because you yourself may have some kind of benefit out of a particular decision. Am I being clear?
Yes.
Okay. So
I,
that's
I,
very, very significant.
so I'm a big believer in what you're saying and the idea that the events early on in life impact us later on. But one of the things I've noticed when I talk to people about this idea is that there's a lot of skepticism and people who want to believe that as an adult, well, I'm in charge of making all my own decisions. Something bad might have happened to me in the past, but it doesn't affect me now. I'm fine. And I'm curious what you say to people when you encounter that skepticism or that disbelief in the idea that early life events affect us so dramatically later on.
Well, this reminds me of something I've seen in the literature, and that is, according to some studies, at least 1/3 of people avoid the truth. The reason they avoid the truth is it's very discomforting. It hurts. It, uh, it they would much rather believe something that gives them the illusion of being connected to others than, for example, other people of the same political perspective, than believe something that appears to conflict with their perceived connection to others. So they deny it, and they will ignore. You can present them with evidence and more evidence, and they will either ignore it or say it can't possibly be true, because it's almost like an addiction. It's a psychological addiction to a certain perspective of reality, and it's very difficult to change. So if I encounter somebody like that, I move on to somebody else. I don't want to waste my time with somebody like that. And I have a limited amount of time. I want to be as effective as I can. So I seek people who are, one of the most common questions I ask about, for example, are you open to new information? That's great. If they hesitate to answer that question, that's a good key.
The phrase I've heard to describe that is, don't try to sell the unsellable.
Yeah, right.
If they're not interested, then, move on. But for those who are listening who are open to new information, what information would you suggest that they check out? Or if they're interested in finding more evidence of this or better understanding it, what are the places or ways that someone could learn more about it? And then also, what are the ways that someone could learn more about how their own early life events might have affected them? Because I know that the other thing that happens when I bring this up talking to people is they'll say, I had this thing happen when I was a kid and maybe that affected me, but I don't really know how, but I feel like it probably did. So what are the ways to learn more about this, both on the academic and informational level, and then also on the personal level?
Okay. I'll mention a few topics that I include in my speaking and my writing. And we're not going to have time for a lot of details, but again, the overview here. I mentioned hospital birth. Okay, there's also, of course, as we well know, the act of circumcision. Extremely traumatic, long-lasting effects, repressed anger and fear, distrust, particularly of the mother. An infant inherently trusts mother to take care of him or her. So what happens to the infant if an event like circumcision happens? How can you trust your mother? It's going to disrupt the relationship, the bond between the infant and the mother. What else? Okay, then there's also other events. Again, we're talking about not satisfying infants' needs here. Infants have a need to be breastfed. In this country, what's common is bottle feeding. Okay, it's not natural. There's research on this. Even the American Academy of Pediatrics recognizes the benefits of breastfeeding, even them. And for various reasons, it's not common in this culture. Moving on, separation. It's very common in this culture for infants to be separated from their mothers. It happens in about half of hospital births. Infants are removed and put in separate rooms, nurseries, to be cared for by staff. And then I think it was a few decades ago, actually, mothers started speaking up about, hey, I want my baby with me, okay? And as a result of a growing number of mothers expressing that opinion, some hospitals started to changing hospital policy is very difficult. It's not a quick thing. Okay, but over a period of years, a growing number of hospitals changed their policy to allow newborn infants to be in the room with the mother. They call it rooming in. At this point in our country, approximately 1/2 of hospitals allow infants to be rooming in with their mothers.